Murdoch's bindery extended from the southeastern wall of the house and had windows on all three sides, providing an unobstructed view of Black Lake and a maple and beech and cedar obstructed view of the bike trail and the Upper Varennes Road. Midges, mayflies, black flies, bees, atmospheric vapors. A little higher than everything around it, the bindery perched at the lower tip of a 5-mile-long esker, wide-eyed and hopeful, in the spirit of a space capsule finally ready to break from the mother ship. Back in the days of Inez Fair, none of it had been here. House, bindery, nothing. Nothing, that is, except the esker, which had been here forever, or at least since the Pleistocene, when long cracks appeared along the surface of the ice sheet. The lake also had been here for a very long time, though possibly not as long as the esker. If Andrea paid closer attention when her husband was talking, maybe she'd remember better. Esker, ice sheet. She tugged at the last section of end paper, which had decided to hang on for dear life. Tenacious, just like Inez. Tenacious, doomed Inez Fair, Varennes Village Schoolmarm. Thurs, Jan 12, taught school. Mr. Bacon asked me to go with him to the donation Tues Eve. Thinking of thee, art thou of me? Though who exactly was this thee? It didn't seem like she meant Mr. Bacon, since Tuesday Eve she went to the donation, whatever that was, with someone named Mart. In 1872, the year Inez Fair began the diary, the tip of the esker would have been a popular location for picnics, given its fine view of Black Lake, which had once been full to the brim with glacial melt. Picnics, parties, maybe even donations, though certainly not in the dead of winter. It was also from here, a year later, that a band of mothers and fathers would watch Miss Inez Fair set forth in a leaky boat with the 8 victims of the Sunday school outing disaster. Nowadays, water levels were down everywhere. The beach on the east side of the lake was twice as big as it had been 30 years ago when Andrea first moved to Varennes. She'd been Andy Aikman then and lived in the geodesic dome on French Hill with 4 Toggenburg goats. And while life had certainly been simpler, could you also say it had been happier? Once, Andrea managed to grow a blue Hubbard squash the size of a manatee, but did that constitute happiness? The doorbell rang. No one who knew the Murdochs ever rang the doorbell, most of their friends and acquaintances tending to walk straight in without knocking. "Could you get that, Danny?" Andrea yelled. And then the bell rang again, and she realized her husband must be back in his study with his box of bones and the radio tuned as usual to the country music station's drawn-out stories of heartbreak and betrayal. The news turned a person's heart to stone, he said. Wed, Jan 16, taught school, went to oyster supper with Eve, came home late. Mother gave me a scolding that I guess I shall remember. A scolding, those were the days. Andrea opened the front door and found 2 girls standing on the porch. 2 girls, the usual combination, one pretty, one plain, and both vaguely familiar. Girl Scouts? Though when they went around selling cookies, weren't they supposed to wear their uniforms? "Sorry to barge in like this, Mrs. Murdoch," said the pretty one. "We'd like to use your phone if that would be all right." Her blonde hair was coiled over her ears, Princess Leia style, and her perfectly regular features were perfectly distributed on a perfectly oval face that Andrea knew wouldn't hold up over time. She told them to come in, and noticed that the blonde made a great show of wiping her feet on the welcome mat, whereas the brunette stumbled across the threshold and looked around wildly the way a horse would if it thought it was going into a barn and suddenly found itself in a flagstone entry hall instead. "Sorry to disturb," said the blonde. "My name is Sunny Crockett. We live just up the road, and this is my friend Lorna." "Of course," said Andrea, recognition striking at last. "Kathy Crockett's your mother." She handed her the phone, since Sonny so obviously appeared to be the one in charge, and then watched, interested, as Lorna calmly but firmly took the phone away from her and punched in 911. A man, Lorna reported, presumed dead on the Varenstown beach. When Andrea gasped, Lorna held a surprisingly well-manicured finger to her lips. Balding and heavy-set, she said, probably about 220 pounds or so, the skin pink but not bright red, meaning he couldn't have been there for more than an hour. No obvious signs of foul play, unless you counted the head wound. No one else's footprints visible. She and her friends had been careful not to disturb the scene. And while she herself hadn't recognized the man, one of her friends said his name was Banner. Lorna listened intently to the dispatcher for several seconds, then shook her head. Not T, she said B. B as in baby. She sounded exasperated, going on to explain that naturally she couldn't swear the man wasn't breathing, since, as she thought she'd mentioned, they'd been careful not to disturb the scene. Andrea felt her face turn red. Menopause, she realized, not embarrassment, though the girls couldn't be expected to know the difference. Carl Banner, Andrea asked. She tensed, hearing the sound of feet on the stairs. Wasn't Carl Banner ever going to leave her alone? Already, she could imagine the change coming over her husband's calm blue eyes and smiling mouth, like a front moving in from the Great Lakes. It was hard being married to a man who treated the least impropriety like the end of the world, like freezing rain and a tractor trailer jackknifing right in front of him, and everything going so fast it might as well not be moving, the immense tire and the windshield racing toward each other yet frozen in time. It was hard being married to a romantic. The world was already acting strange millions of years ago. Water had its way with rock. Liquid beat solid. Ice is supposed to be obdurate, unyielding, but back then it rippled and flowed. The glacier rode the world, and the world let it change it, like a girl riding her lover and turning his prick to foam, exactly the way it is today. The world was strange from day one. Let there be light, God said, and there was light. There is probably nothing more beautiful and implausible than the world, nothing that makes less sense, the gray bud of the willow, silky and soft, the silk-white throat of the cobra, the wish of nature or humans to subsume all living matter in fire and flood. I will hurt you, hurt you, hurt you, says the world, and then a meadow arches its back, and golden pollen sprays forth. Everyone prefers to stick with the subject of people, but how short-sighted to leave out the question of how we got here and where we're going. At least 4 glaciers covered Varennes over the past 3 million years. And even then, how beautiful. Rock cased in ice, the sun extracting greens and blues. Though to say everything was more beautiful without people, before people, even to go so far as to imagine after people, is obscene. Banner, Mies was thinking. Think. But what is this stuff? What is it? Where do we go and how? We are just human beings. Pink. Blink, stink. The inside walls, so unexpectedly thick, yellowish, and made of small pieces piled in alternating rows similar to bricks, curving beehive shape toward the top. The bread oven they visited on the class trip, and "This is where the smoke goes out," said the handsome French baker, and Sonny blushed, the fool. Hurry, it's not like you've got all day. Mr. Banner, Mr. Banner, Mr. Banner. Like reaching your arm into a box you can't see inside of, except, guess what? You're already there. like the man who put his arm in a jar full of mosquitoes in the film strip about yellow fever to test his hypothesis, even though he knew he would die.